Welcome back, everybody. Today we are going to be taking a look at 30 different roof styles that you can use in Minecraft. Each of the styles that we're going to be looking at are based off of real-life examples. As we go through, we're going to be covering not only how to build each style, but we're also going to cover what function they serve. And that's going to help you decide how to use each of these styles in your own projects. And before we get into looking over all of the different styles, one thing I wanted to point out is that you may notice that all of the builds behind me are very monochromatic. And that was an intentional design choice because I want the focus of this video to be on the styles of the roof and not on the rest of the build. But I think that covers everything, so let's get started. First up, we have the gable roof. And this is probably one of the most common designs out there for a roof. It's really easy to build, it's really simple to come up with, and it can fit a lot of different structures. With this one that we have here, I use stairs to go up the sides. We've got slabs along the top, and that is basically all that you need to be able to create it. There are some things though that you can do to mix it up to make it just a little bit more interesting. For example, you can add in some different blocks along the side, and that will help add just a little bit of variety to it. Another way to mix it up is to add in some different types of blocks along the main part of the roof, and that's going to mix up the texture a little bit and just make it more interesting to look at. The second style that we're looking at is a variation on the gable roof, and this is called the box gable roof. The difference between this one and the one that we looked at before is that you have this area right here filled in. Something else that you can do is add in some stairs underneath to add extra support to it. You could do the same thing on this side. And now suddenly you have a little bit more variety to your build as well. Our next roof style is not necessarily a separate style, but it's rather a feature that you can add to your roof, which are these dormers here. And adding in dormers to a roof not only helps you to break up what is otherwise a flat surface, but it also helps you add in light to the interior as well. Next up, we have the A-frame. And you might be wondering, well, what's the difference between an A-frame and a gable roof? Because they both have two slopes that meet at the center. And the difference is that the A-frame has the roof go all the way to the ground, which means that you only have two walls that you have to worry about, the front wall and the back wall, and then the rest is just a roof. For this design, we went with a steeper pitch on the roof than what we had with the gable, and that's created by putting in full blocks under each of the stairs. The A-frame roof type is a great choice for rustic builds, so something like a lakeside cabin would be perfect for it. Our next design is one that you'll see in a lot of modern houses, and that's the hip roof, which has all of the sides sloped down to the walls. So there's no gable like we had in the A-frame or the gable roof. And this is another design that's really simple to build because you just have stairs going all the way around the structure with slabs at the top. A variation on the hip roof is the cross hip roof, and that's just where you have a build that's either a T shape or an L shape, or it has some part of the build that sticks out and the roof just follows the line of the building. But no matter what, you're always going to have the roof slope down to the walls. But while this is a variation on the hip roof, the next one that we're going to look at is a variation on the gable roof. And this is called a gambrel roof. And you might recognize it as being a roof type that you would see on a barn. And the difference between a gable roof and a gambrel roof is that there's two different angles in a gambrel roof. So the first one is a steep angle right here, and then the next one is a more shallow angle right here, which is achieved by having full blocks in the first one that go underneath the stairs while having just stairs in the second one. But the gambrel roof is a good one to use for farms or farmhouses or barns, or you could use them for any type of build if you just want to mix things up. But speaking of barns, our next roof is a shed roof, and a shed roof is characterized by having just a single slope. In this case, I use stairs for the slope, so we have a pretty steep angle here. And at the top, it does look a little bit strange, but I think that's just because we don't have vertical slabs in Minecraft. So there's just not a lot that you can do to make it match up with what we've got down at the bottom. But just because it's called a shed roof doesn't mean that you have to use it for a shed. In fact, a shed roof can be useful if you have a wall that you want to put a bunch of big windows on that would otherwise not fit if you were to do something like a gable roof. And if you don't want to just have a single slope, you could do something like this, where you've got two slopes that are not connected up. And what this will do is create what's called a clerestory. And a clerestory is essentially just a wall that allows you to put in some extra windows. Splitting up the two slopes of the roof like this is a nice, easy way to create something that's a little bit more interesting than a simple gable roof. Another variation of the gable roof is the Saltbox roof, and that's created by having a short angle on one side while having a long slope on the other side. And so this would be a single story right here, and then you'd have two stories right here. The Saltbox roof gets its name from the salt boxes used in the 16th and 17th century, and the way that those would work is that they would be up against the wall and they'd have a large flap at the front. that you would lift up to be able to get the salt out. And this roof design was used by houses that were originally built around that same time period. This next one looks like an inverse gable roof, which you can see in the back, but this is actually called a butterfly roof. And like with the shed roof, the reason to have a design like this is to maximize the space that you have over here for windows. Now, in real life, this roof can create some risk for water damage because you have everything flowing down into the center point. But fortunately in Minecraft, we don't have to worry about that. Another roof design which might create some risk for water damage in real life is called the M roof. And it's essentially just two gable roofs next to each other, but typically you're going to have this side be a little bit longer, although I didn't do that here. But where this type of roof design might be useful is if you're going to have several of these in a row, and then you would probably put a door here, another door here, and this could be a great way to have two separate units next to each other. This next one is, I'll admit, a bit boring, and that's because there's just not a lot of different ways that you can do it. This is a flat roof, and a flat roof is flat. Now, in real life, a flat roof can actually have a slight slope to it, and that's necessary because you want to make sure that the water runs off. You wouldn't want the water pooling up and collecting when it rains. But as we've covered previously, we don't have to worry about that here. A flat roof is a good choice if you're doing a modern design. And another way that you can mix it up is to put blocks along the border like this, and then just have the flat section in the center. But what's the opposite of a flat roof? Well, pretty much all of the designs that we've looked at, but our next one is also very much not flat, and this is called a sawtooth roof, but you can tell why it's called that because it's got these jagged points, such as what you would see on a saw. Now, for this roof type, you would probably not see it on a residential building in real life. In real life, you'd probably see this in a warehouse, and the reason that you would have a design like this is, again, you'd be putting in windows here to make sure that the center of the building is lit up. And it would also be a lot wider. These would probably stretch along this ways way more. But just for purposes of getting the design in, I went with a more narrow building. Our next design is a variation of the hip roof, and it's called a pyramid hip roof because all of the sides slope up into a single point here. Now, you would have to have a square structure like this to be able to create that, because if it's not square, it's not going to meet in a single point. So this is a roof style that's a little bit more limited in how you can use it. We're sticking with our hip roof variations on this next design, and this is called a Dutch gable roof. And what you have here is at the bottom, the hip roof, but at the top, you've got a gable roof. If you're working with a larger structure than what we've got here, you could do a lot more with this space. With this size of a build, there's a pretty limited functionality for what you could do here. But this does add a little bit more variety than you might otherwise have in just a standard hip roof. But while we had the gable at the top on this one, this next one flips that. So we've got hip roof at the top, gable at the bottom, and this is called a Jerkinhead roof, and it's a pretty nice style. I think it would also work in builds like a medieval style, but you see this in modern houses as well. The next roof design that we have is called a Mansard roof, and what this does is it takes the idea behind a hip roof, but it makes the angle of the roof a lot steeper. And the reason that you would do this is because it gives you a lot more floor space on the inside. And this is another roof design that I've not used a lot, but I do think it's a pretty interesting one and one that I should start using a lot more. But it's a pretty easy one to create. You just have stairs, full block, stairs, full block, slabs. And I could see a lot of different variations that you could use with this. This next one is not necessarily a different style. This is more of an add-on to a roof, and it's called a monitor roof, which is like a dormer in that we're just adding to the roof that we already have. So it pops up a little section, and what this does is it creates another opportunity to add in some windows while also breaking up what is otherwise a very plain looking roof. And while we have this on a gable roof, you could do this on any of the other designs that we've looked at today. Our next design is another variation on the shed roof, and this is called a Skillion roof. And essentially what makes up a Skillion roof is just having multiple angles for your roof in different areas. But this is a good one to remember because it's another easy way to make your build look pretty interesting. So far, the roofs that we have looked at have all been rather pointy roofs or flat roofs. Our next set of roofs are going to be more in the curved variety, starting with this one here. This is called a barrel vault, and it's essentially a half circle. But what I've done here in order to make this work is that we've got full blocks and then we've got slabs under here, because without the slabs, it just doesn't look right with how that connection is there. And I think that the slabs help make the blocks feel a lot more connected. With the barrel vault, the bigger you build it, the more rounded it's going to look. It's also a really good roof type if you're building something like a warehouse, because a barrel vault is going to allow for a lot more space on the interior. This next one is going to seem very similar to what we just looked at, but this is a curved roof, and unlike the barrel vault, what separates it is that it's a little bit flatter. So you've got a curve here. It's not necessarily a half circle. You could also do this in a couple of different ways. You could have the curve be more pronounced. So it could be more like an airplane wing where it's a longer line here and then a sharper curve at the end. I went with just a flatter circle. And to create this exact shape, we've got a stair, a second stair, then we've got a full block, then we have 2 slabs making up a full block going across here. And as with the barrel vault, the bigger the structure, the better the curve is going to look. Another great rounded design is to use a dome roof. Now, for this dome roof, you could do it with all full blocks, but with the size that we have here, I think it made a lot of sense to put in some different types of blocks. So we've got stairs right here, we've got slabs right here, and then we've got slabs up here as well. And that just helps to break it up a little bit better than if they were all full blocks. With the dome roof, you can fit it on multiple different types of structures. So on this one, I have it in a cylinder so that it's matching up like this. Or you could put it on top of a square structure like what we have here, and that helps to just create something that's a little bit more unique. A variation on the dome is the dome vault, and as you can see here, this has the dome in the center, these vaults on the side, and where you would likely see something like this would be in something like a cathedral or a museum or large structures. Here on this scale, it's a little bit harder to do, but I do think we ended up with something pretty nice here, even though it is on the smaller side. This is probably a good point to mention that there is a world download in the description if you want to take a look at all of these designs and see how they are done in more detail. And I definitely recommend checking that out if you've got any questions on how to put these together. Our next roof is a cone roof, and this is one that, again, is probably going to work better on a medieval build, but you could probably include this in other builds if you want to do something that's a little out of the ordinary. In order to get this shape, we do have quite a few different things going on here. So we've got stairs on the side, then we've got a stair in the middle. We repeat that on this level, but we've got walls here. And then as we get up, we've just got more stairs building up into the center where we have this wall at the final point. From a distance, it's not too bad of a shape. Up close, it also doesn't look too bad. You could do a lot of different things with these blocks though. You can switch out any of these blocks for different colors if you want to add just a little bit more spice to it. Next up, we have another one that is not a new style. This is more of an add-on, and it's this part right here. This is called a dropped eave or a cat slide. And what it is just an extension of this side of the roof, and it comes down right here. And where you would find this typically in real life is when they've done an add-on to the house, and rather than do a completely new roof for that section, they've just extended what's already there. The next one that we are going to look at here is not a new style. This is a variation on one that we've already seen. This is a gable roof that doesn't have any eaves, and the eaves are the part of the roof that stick out past the wall. And I'll admit that this is a style that I don't really like in real life. I don't particularly like it in Minecraft, but there are some builders out there who can do a really good job with them, and I can appreciate the amount of work that they put in to make it look good. We're just about done. Our second to last one that we're going to look at is this one right here, which is one where we are mixing and matching designs. So we've got a hip roof at the front, we've got a gable roof at the back, and this is something that you can do with any of the ones that we've looked at. When you're creating a build, you can put in different sections to that build, and then you can use those different sections to add variety in the roof. And you don't necessarily need to keep it just with a hip roof and a gable roof. You can mix in any of the other ones that we've looked at. So you could have a shed roof and a gable roof. You could have a shed roof and a hip roof. You can have a gambrel roof that has dormers, which are gables. You could pretty much do it in any combination that you want that you think looks good. The point in including this one is just to remind you that you don't need to just have one style for one build. You can mix and match. And that brings us to our final design right here. And the point that I wanted to make with this one is to emphasize that you don't just need to use stairs. Even though I use stairs in the majority of these designs, you can also use a lot of different types of blocks for your roof. So here we've got a combination of slabs and full blocks. This is a variation on a hip roof, but you can see here that we're able to accomplish some interesting things by using full blocks and slabs that we couldn't accomplish with stairs. So we've got some arches over here for the eaves. The roof is not just straight lines, it's got more curve to it, and it's a good way to add just a little bit more uniqueness to your build if you don't stick with just one type of block. But there you go. We've covered 30 different roof styles that you can use in your builds, and I hope that going through them gave you some ideas for your projects. As I mentioned, there is going to be a link in the description to a world download if you want to take a look at any of these designs in more detail and get a close-up look at how all of them were created. But don't limit yourself to the size of the builds or the blocks that were used or the colors that were used. Put your own spin on it, because there are a lot of different ways that you can build a roof in Minecraft. And with that, I think that's all we're going to do for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a like. If you want to see more, please subscribe. And until next time, see you later.